I had never run for office before. It was my first time as a candidate. And I decided I wanted to run because I felt like the state legislature wasn't standing up for our rights during COVID, with the masking and the business shutdowns, and just sort of letting the governor have his way. And I felt like we needed stronger voices in the state legislature. And of course, I knew my opponent would be the Speaker of the House. So it would give us an opportunity to elect new leadership. So I couldn't see a way around it. So I filed and ran for the first time and did a lot of door knocking. Must have knocked on well over 1,000 doors. And it was a great campaign. I met a lot of people, and just about everybody I talked to said, we feel like it's time for somebody new. And it was very encouraging.
We heard a lot of that up here when we were door knocking as well. Like people are finally waking up.
Right. Yeah, definitely. People are awake, and they know what's going on. And I think that they are ready to have stronger representation. And, I got involved in this by speaking at the school board meetings. I didn't like that my child that was still in school was being masked, and I felt like it should be the parents' decision. So I think we're all kind of on this journey of, awareness and standing up. And, I really feel bad that I went so many years not getting involved in the school board meetings. When my kids were really little, I was a room mother and that sort of thing, but I never got involved in, the decision making that the school board does. And I didn't keep up on it. And looking back, I wish I had. I think I represent more of the people as far as, attitudes concerning individual rights, constitutional rights, that sort of thing that people are awakening to. But, the campaign's over, and so now we're at the next step, which is petitioning for the recount. So
can we start at the election process? Because I feel like just basic election education has not been available to the general public, and they don't understand the process, and they automatically assume that their votes are counted. Can we start at when they hand you the ballot and kind of explain that process?
Yeah, are you talking about the actual election process? Like going in and voting?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Well, yeah, people fill out a paper ballot, and then they put it into a machine made by a company called Heart, and marketed and maintained by a company called HARP with a P, which is kind of interesting. And they put it into the machine, and it's scanned, and the numbers are counted, and then they print them out on a tape that's put on the window at each of the locations, the voting locations. And they used to have voting at every precinct, but then they decided to, during COVID, that was another thing they did, where they reduced the number of locations that people could go to vote. And so that's where we are.
So I just want to make it clear, when you get your ballot, you mark up your ballot with your votes, you send it through the machine. At no point are there eyes and hand counts of the actual votes. The only thing the poll workers verify are the number of ballots that went through the machine. Is that correct?
Right, and even that is done digitally, I'm sure. There's not a count of the number of people who go into the voting location, and that we can use to compare with the totals from the election. So that's not done. And no, they do not take a look at it. They don't. There's no hand counting done at all. It just goes into the machine. And when you walk in, you sign up on what looks like an iPad, and those are the poll books, the electronic poll books. And it used to be you signed in person on the big giant paper book, but now you do it on this electronic machine. So, you can't go back signatures. You don't have that paper documentation. And it used to be that local people would count all the ballots. And if there was the clerk told me before the election that it was very that there was a disputed ballot. And if it was very easy to determine what the person meant, typically. It was a great process for many years, and I trust the local people, and I feel like it would be great if we could get back to hand counting, of course.
So after the election, what did you file? Because you're attempting to basically get human eyes and hands counting the actual votes to verify what the machine said. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes. The ballots are sitting in the bellies of the machines. That's my understanding. And they've never been touched. They've never been looked at by human eyes or hands. It's just been through the electronic scanner. And so what I'm asking is just that those ballots will be pulled out and counted by local people. It's under a statute, KRS 120.095. And I'm not alleging fraud. I'm not accusing anyone of anything. It's just exercising my right by this law to have a ballot count. And this would be the first time to have a hand count of these ballots, the first time anyone would see them. And it makes sense because, these machines are brand new. This is the first election that they've ever been used in. And when you have new technology, I think it's natural to want to check it. And so that's why we call it check the tech. So we're saying, let's check the tech. Why not? And the reaction has been so strong against this, from the Secretary of State, who's the chief election official of the Board of Elections. He had said that if we ponied up the money for the bond, we'd get our count, me and the other petitioners. And I ponied up the money. People that donated to this effort, many, many people donated, and were wonderful, just stepped up to help with this. And so we presented the money, a check to the circuit court office, but we still don't have our count. And instead of keeping his word, the Secretary of State continues to have his attorneys fight against me.
So how much was that?
It was $21,700 to count 6,139 ballots, to sort and count 6,139 ballots.
And they're just sitting on that check right now.
They took out about $1,400 that they said that they needed for security and moving the ballots. They're going to charge me for that, even though there's nothing in the statute that says that they can charge me. It just says they can charge me for a count of the ballots. It doesn't say anything about charging me for moving the ballots.
So you file under the statute, you go to court, and then Michael Adams' team goes in and says, we want this dismissed on grounds that the proper parties weren't served, even though the statute, you did serve the proper parties. Then the judge dismisses it. Where are you at with the case now?
Well, right now, we have asked the circuit court, the attorney filed with the circuit court judge, asking for him to vacate or change his ruling, and or vacate it, which means to sort of set it aside and give us a new ruling. And of course, we'd like for him to change his mind basically and say, yeah, go ahead with the count. You paid the bond, go ahead with it. That we've also filed with the appeals court. So, we could go either way. And we've also requested to have all the money returned.
I want to make sure people understand why they need to support you in this, because you're one of the few candidates who are basically asking for transparency in this process. And now is a beautiful time for Michael Adams and all of these legislators to come together and be like, yeah, we're going to prove our machines work. But instead, what is Michael Adams saying?
Right. It's very interesting. Not only did he say, yeah, I'll get the count if I pony up the money, and then that never happened. He's just accusing me of these terrible things, and the other petitioners. It's saying that we want to take a crowbar to the digital machines and destroy them with a crowbar, and he's not going to let that happen on his watch.
And you want the world to burn, right?
Right. He wants that we went to see the world burn.
Right.
Yeah. And also something else that's very misleading. He keeps saying things like, I could have proven, that there was something wrong, that there was fraud, but I chose not to. But the thing is, the statute that I filed under doesn't require any of that. It's just a request for a simple count. Now, if I was challenging and I was saying that there was fraud and it would be my responsibility to prove that, that's a different statute. But I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying, hey, let's count the ballots. And there's a law for that, as long as I paid the expenses in full, which I did. So yeah, it's very interesting. The pushback that we're getting, and then also the promise that was made and not kept, the promise that if we ponied up the money that we'd get the count, and we didn't. And so it just leaves you asking why is he not letting this go through? Why doesn't he pull back his attorneys and let this happen? Yeah, he said, I have a few of his quotes here. I'm also trying to protect the election machines from being hacked by these cyber ninjas and so forth. And he says they're asking the court to cut them a break on the cost, which was certainly not true. My attorney was arguing for the lowest cost possible, which is what a good attorney would do. And he used some precedent cases to do that. And we were astounded when they came back with $21,700 for 6,100 ballots. So yeah, it's been an eye opener.
Well, so if you get this hand count and the hand count is not verifying what the machines were, we know what happens then, but is there a chance if the hand counts don't match that what happens to that election?
Well, the election is the hand count would be binding. The results would be binding, but of course it could be appealed. But I'm I don't know who would appeal it, but it would be binding. And another thing about Michael Adams is talking about, he said, most of these people I've never heard of. They didn't come to the Republican Party meetings in the 20 years I've been involved in the Republican Party. And he said, we're not real Republicans. So I guess because, I've been a Republican for many, many years, but I just got involved in politics. So I guess in his mind, you're not a real Republican if you haven't been involved in politics, which, flies in the face of the idea of citizen lawmakers, which I think is the ideal for the founding fathers, wanted people, just regular people, to run for office. And now that I have, and I'm trying to exercise my rights, it's having this pushback is really amazing. Very old-fashioned approach, and he seems to think that in fact, he said that if we went back to hand counts, there would be mass fraud. But I would be agreeable to a combination of hand and machine counts. It doesn't have to be one. And but they keep talking about people insisting on hand counts only, and that's not necessarily the case. It's just sort of misguiding, creating a false image of what's actually happening.
Yeah, why wouldn't you want to do checks and balances both ways? So the machine counts all the votes, then you take a hand count and you compare the two and you audit it that way. What's the problem?
Right. Yeah, that would be agreeable. We already have the machines, so I would be fine with that. But just trusting the technology, just trusting the machines, blindly trusting, I just don't think that makes sense. And we have had where the ballots have been recounted and it wasn't accurate. So, and moving ahead, we've got to decide: do we want to trust the technology? Do we want to have blind trust in it, or do we want to have human beings? And this is also a matter of local control. Really, we have no local person, and the reason we elect our county clerks is because they're in charge of the elections. So it's nice to know that a local official that's elected and local people are getting their hands on these ballots and making sure that they are what they say they are. I don't blindly trust the machines, and I absolutely believe that most people don't either. But on social media, a lot of times, the comments are turned off, and I've also noticed the media is very one-sided. the way they paint the picture, to say that, that Michael Adams is putting down, misconceptions about voter fraud. It's never even. It's, never both sides given equal time.
Well, I can tell you, when I went and voted in the primary, I filled out my ballot, I put it in the machine. The machine popped up a screen that said, "You voted." There was absolutely no verification on my end that I got to see what the machine said I voted for. I didn't get a ticket, nothing.
Right.
And I didn't like
Right.
that. Just in general, you get a receipt when you go to the grocery store. Why can't we at least get a receipt from the voting machine?
Yeah, all we do is we get to see, if we know where to look on the screen, you see a number click up. That's the extent of it.
So how can people help you, Bridgette? What can we do?
The best thing people can do is just think critically when you read an article, sort of read through what's being said. And I think people are already doing that. When you see that things are completely one-sided on a story, you have to think there's maybe more to it. Just as I said, Adam saying that, we were trying, that I was trying to get taxpayers to pay for part of this. That was never the case. That was never the case. The statute says that I will pay for it, and my supporters and I paid for the whole count. Again, it's a smear. So, there have been articles in the Courier-Journal and the Louisville Courier-Journal about me, and no one has ever contacted me from the Louisville Courier-Journal for a comment. That's not journalism, that's propaganda.
Well, and I'd also like to point out that where our tax dollars are wasted are when Michael Adams sends his teams to these courtrooms to get these cases dismissed instead of taking the money from the bonds and actually giving us the hand count. He's wasting tax dollars.
That's right. And it goes on and on and on. I have no doubt he has a team of attorneys fighting, the motions that my attorney submits. I can only imagine how many thousands of dollars it's run into. Now that, you're right, that's where the taxpayer money is being spent. The actual bond count would have been funded completely by me. But because they continue to fight this, they're racking up what will probably be tens of thousands of dollars in expenses. And the attorneys are having to drive all over the state to attend these hearings. And it's perplexing. It's why on earth would they not want the count to go through? And just to quiet us down. If we're wrong, prove us wrong. But they won't do it. They're fighting it tooth and nail.
Well, I know I'm tired of paying for this nonsense.
Yeah.
Michael Adams. So how can people follow your story? Like, how are we going to keep up with what is happening and where you're at in your case and that sort of stuff?
Well, I post pretty regularly on Facebook. It's at Bridge for KY on Facebook. My handle is Bridge for Truth. And that's really my only vehicle to get the word out. I've contributed to news releases that have been sent to many organizations, many media organizations, but have gotten very little response. Not a lot of interest in covering this. And as I said, when it is covered, it's usually from the Secretary of State's point of view exclusively, at least with the Courier-Journal.
Well, yes, I've seen that. That is also personally happened to me. I had a client tell me the other day, like, well, didn't you see on TV that voter fraud's not a thing? It's like, yeah. I don't watch TV. I actually follow what's happening.
Right. Well, and they just had a hearing in Frankfurt to, and I think it was basically a show hearing to counter what's happening, because they're trying to give the image that, yes, we're on top of it. There's nothing wrong here. And yet people are not dumb. It's like, we can see if they're not going to allow the count, something's wrong. It makes no sense. And so you can have all the hearings you want, and it's not going to prove the case. They need to allow the count. One thing I forgot to mention too about the total, the $21,700 that they charged for the bond. that included $5,000 in snacks and incidentals. I think it was for 9 people for 4 days, I believe. So yeah, so we paid top dollar and didn't try to charge anybody anything, and we still didn't get our count.
It's just insane.
So you paid $5,000 for snacks and incidentals,
Right.
and still no count.
And still no count.
Now, if you do get a hand count, who are the people who get to perform the hand count? Are they taking volunteers, employees from government?
The circuit court judge would decide that, who the people would be to conduct the count. And we offered to have volunteers do it free of charge. But that hasn't come to pass.
I'll do it. I'll volunteer.
I bet you would. That would be great. But I am very hopeful moving forward. I am. I have a great attorney, and we're hitting all the case law and proving it left and right that this is absolutely our right. So the reason they dismissed it was they said I did not name the county clerk or my opponent as parties to the case. But the statute doesn't say that they need to be named as parties to the case. There are statutes where you're alleging fraud that you do need to name your opponent, but this isn't one of those. It says to name the State Board of Elections, which is what I did. They certify the election, and they're the entity that the statute says should be named. So we feel like we have a very solid case moving forward. And also the judge could have named my opponent as a party to the case if he so chose to do that. He could name the clerk as a party to the case. So we feel very hopeful.
Yes, I can't wait to see what unfolds here. If there's any site people can go to support the cause, I know you said they can follow you on Facebook. Is there a place we can donate to?
You could go to my campaign website. It's bridgeforky.com or bridgeforkentucky.com is my website. And there's a donation icon on there from my campaign that's still active.
And were you aware that Republican parties across the state are censuring Michael Adams for his behavior and his comments and what he's actually doing?
Yes, I am. I was so excited when I saw the Republican Party of Hart County did that. I am so grateful for their leadership stepping up and speaking out strongly against this.
Boone County just did it Monday, so it's coming out.
No, what?
Boone County Republican Party, we just voted to do it too on Monday.
Oh, wonderful. I heard that may be happening, that you're the first actual confirmation that I've gotten. Thank you, Boone County Republican Party. Wonderful. That's just great. That's what we need is the people on the grassroots level and speaking out. And these parties do have power if they speak out and speak strongly. And I'm hoping that more parties will follow suit, because if we rights by law for transparency in the elections, then we could be in trouble.
Board of Elections representative from the county was the only one who raised her hand opposing some of the verbiage, because she said, well, it's not Michael Adams who's dismissing these cases, it's the judges. So is he really responsible for that?
OMG.
Yeah. Well, let me just say that my the judge in my case had set my bond, and it wasn't until the attorney for the Board of Elections filed a motion to dismiss that the case was dismissed.
Well, yes, so, I brought it to Emily Shelton's attention that the Board of Elections is headed by Michael Adams.
Correct.
I do appreciate your time in explaining all of this, because I do think it's helpful once people are educated in the communities that they start throwing more support behind fixing the problems, Right.
And we are getting a lot of support locally, as I said, but I know that there's a lot of people that just don't know because of the relative media blackout, at least on our side of the issue. So I think as more people become aware, they're absolutely on the side of transparency. They're absolutely on the side of finding an answer other than just trusting these digital machines blindly. You know, people do not trust blindly. And so that's why I appreciate you having me on to talk about it, because the more we get the word out, the better.
Well, Stacy and I always talk about how we're the new media, because the mainstream media and the local supposedly legit media is not bringing it to the forefront. They're part of the problem. They're absolutely part of the problem.
Right. Especially when you have one-sided stories, it no longer becomes journalism, it becomes propaganda.
That's what they're doing.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to share with us, Bridgette?
No, just thank you so much for having me on, and I'll keep you posted. I do have a hearing this Friday at 1 o'clock, so hopefully we'll get some good news. You know, that would be wonderful if the judge decided to vacate his decision and rule to go ahead with the count. So, you know, that's what I appreciate, everyone's prayers and good wishes that that's what will happen.
Well, we appreciate you, because
Absolutely.
you're doing this really for everybody. That, you know, that it's amazing that you're willing to put yourself through all these processes and then the negative publicity from people who have power, and you've put yourself out there, and that's amazing. Thank you for doing that for all of us.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. It really is my joy, and I care so much about this country. I have kids, and I care about the future, and I want them to live in a healthy republic, as our founders intended. And we've taken a wrong turn, and I know we're all stepping up. It's not just me. It's you and your program, and it's the people that donated from my count. It's people doing things in so many ways. So yeah, we're growing and we're awake.
Well, good. Now we'll just pray that God blesses all of our hard work.
Right. I think he's going to. I truly believe it. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you both so much.
Thank you, Bridgette.